Good afternoon to one and all present on the August occasion of Kartik Purnima, and to top it, the Samudra Manthan event today here at our host university, Siksha Anusandhan, deemed to be university. I'm Monalisa Mishra, and I'm extremely glad to welcome you all to this auspicious Samudra Manthan Project Dhara of Amrit Mahotsav event 2022. Samudra Manthan is a part of the IKS, Indian Knowledge System project Dhara, which is again a part of Amrit Mahotsav celebrations. As we all know, we belong to the rich heritage and culture congregation, a subcontinent that celebrated tradition, heritage, customs in its own way, in its own beauty. As the name goes, Samudra Manthan, it is all about the maritime miracles. It's all about the traders, the merchants of Kalinga. Kalinga, better known as Odisha today. So the Kalinga Putra took a voyage, better known as Sadhabapurs, and they have left the footprints of amazing maritime science and maritime achievements. To celebrate the Dhara project, the Samudra Manthan, today we have with us our esteemed guests, and we are delighted to have with us Professor Nachieketa Sharma, Director, University Outreach Program, SOA, who is yes, he deserves a great round of applause, who has been the whistleblower of many outreach programs. And we are glad enough to work under his guidance to host this amazing Samudra Manthan program. And we are very delighted to have with us Professor Ganti S. Murthy, National Coordinator of IKS Division, and Srimati Priyanka Chandra, Director, AKAM, MOC, and we shall be very delighted to have with us Shri Sanjeev Sanyal, Member of Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister. And may I now request all our esteemed guests to grace the occasion today and take the seats with us at the dais. Please. Thank you so much. I'm glad to mention here that we have Indian Navy with us today with their dashing uniform, which makes us swollen with pride. We also have with us we are delighted to have with us our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor P.K. Nanda, who has always been very, very enthusiastic about amazing outreach programs. Thank you so much, sir. And now it's time to lit the divine lamp. So may I now request all our esteemed days to light the lamp, the divine lamp, and get invoked for today's auspicious ceremony. Thank you so much. Yes. May I now request Shreya's Gorevikar to come and be a part of the invocation with the chanting.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Nishusi Ganapate Ganeshu Tvama Huru Vipratamam Kavinam न अरुते त्वत्क्रियते किञ्चनारे महामरकं घवञ्चित्रमर्चा देवीं वाचमजनयन्त देवाः तां विश्वरूपाः पशवो वदन्ति सा नो मन्द्रेशमूर्जन्दुहाना धेनुर्वागस्मानुपसुष्टुतैतु यद्वाग्वदन्त्यविचेतनानि राष्ट्रीदेवानान्निशसादमन्द्रा चतस्र ऊर्जन्दुदुहे पयागुंसि क्वस्विदस्याः परमं जगाम अनन्तामन्तादधिनिर्मिता महीम् यस्यां देवा अदधुर्भोजनानि एकाक्षरान् द्विपदागुं षट्पदाञ्च वाचं देवा उपजीवन्ति विश्वे सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
Thank you so much, Shreyas Bhaiya, for helping us invoke Lord Jagannath and his blessings for this auspicious occasion. Now, may I request our guests and everybody to stand up for the SOA anthem. Thank you so much.
जय भारत वर्षोत्कर्ष विधायिनी जय विश्व विजयिनी जय विद्ये जन गण मनोरंजनी जय हे जय जननी शिक्षानुसंधान रक्षा विद्या प्रदाने सुरक्षा भुवने जयतु प्रयुक्ति परशाला क्षेम प्रवर्तिनी ज्ञानेन शीलेन लोला विज्ञान नैपुण्यमाला भुवने जयतु प्रतिभा वर्षाला प्रकाश विकारिणी लोक प्रधानैक सेवा श्रद्धानुरागैक भावा लोक प्रधानैक सेवा श्रद्धानुरागैक भावा भुवने जयतु प्रचार सुखशाला प्रशम प्रदायिनी जय हे जय हे जय हे शिक्षानुसंधान जय हे
Thank you, dignitaries. Thank you, everyone. Please take your seats. May I now request our volunteers to present the bouquets to our esteemed dignitaries. We are extremely delighted to have our esteemed dignitaries with us today. Thank you, dear volunteers.
No, the Navy video will run after my speech. Yes, Navy video will run after his speech. So now there is no video, I think. I'm not doctor, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal. He's more than doctor. Now he says, I'll introduce you. No, I will come. You just introduce and start.
Yeah. So we march ahead with the event of today. We are extremely glad to have with us Shri Sanjeev Sanyal, Member Economic Advisor Council.
Not speak now. I will welcome. His office.
All right. So may I now request our very beloved Professor Nachieketa Sharma sir to come and say a few words. Thank you, sir.
Distinguished audience, distinguished naval officers, my dear students, and also distinguished dignitaries on the dais. This particular Dhara event is of landmark significance because it is manifesting on the source of Kalinga, which has held a position of paramount importance in the maritime itihas of Bharatavarsha. India's commercial forays into the Southeast Asia, very aptly celebrated as Bali Yatra, could not have been confined to commerce alone, given the fact that India has had a golden past as a center of Jnana Manthana as well. Diligent research needs to be undertaken to explore the link between commerce and academics in ancient Indian ecosystem. In the long run, the amalgamation of India's glorious past and the current reinvention of India's immense potential to reclaim global leadership make the present even a giant step forward in the process of nation building. It is indeed fortuitous for our university that today we are embellished with the gracious presence of distinguished personalities who are so closely involved in the process of reclaiming our nation's status as Sone ki Chidiya. My dear young friends, all of you know that we are living in Amrit Kal. Sometimes when I am discussing with my IKS colleagues, I think this century is India's century. Reclamation, rejuvenation, and revitalization of our dharohar, our culture, our system. When I was traveling with Sanjeev Sanyal ji yesterday, the kind of history that has been fed to us needs rethinking, revitalizing, rejuvenation. And my dear friends, all of you will be very happy. If you want to see a freedom fighter, at least you will see that Sanjeev Sanyal ji is the pota, the grand nephew of late Sachindranath Sanyal. So a large round of applause. So the Hindustan Socialist Republic Association, Anushilan Samiti, if you have known little amount of history of India's freedom struggle, then you can know who is Sachindranath Sanyal. I am very happy. I was so excited that I request to have a selfie with him last night, my dear friend. So on behalf of the university, I welcome you, sir. We have amongst us none other than the director of Ministry of Culture. Ministry of Culture is so much associated with Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Under Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, this Dhara conference is a very important milestone. Every month they choose a topic and it is being celebrated in a very large scale. And the more importance is Jan Bhagidari. We must know about us. That is very, very important. Unless you know about your roots, who you are, what is your glorious past, then you always will live with a mental block. Isn't it? Always you will live with a defeatist mentality. You will see how when Sanjeev Sanyal will speak, he will explore these kind of things. So I am, on behalf of the university, I am welcoming Madam Chandraji, the Director of Ministry of Culture. Welcome, Madam. So, and in the dais is the National Coordinator of Indian Knowledge System, Bharatiya Gyan Parampara. Our university has contributed immensely in the outreach activities of Indian knowledge systems. We have got interns, we have got a project to find out miniaturization of Siddhantic astronomical instrument. Especially, we have got the great astronomer Pathani Samanta and the instruments that he has used in calculating, and he has compiled a book called Siddhanta Darpana, consisting of 2,500 slokas. My dear friends, you will be surprised to find that the value of pi, because this is not a forum, but you will be really, sometimes you will be bewildered why all these things were hidden from us, why we are not able to know our glorious past, who we were both in mathematics and astronomy. So Indian knowledge system, I am extremely thankful to the IKS divisions, and on behalf of the entire university and all the audience, I am welcoming Professor Ganti, Suryanar and Murthy to this function. Welcome, sir. We have amongst us our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Pradipta Nanda, and Dean Students Welfare, Professor Jyotiranjan Das, without whose assistance this program could not have succeeded. I am welcoming all of you, sir, to this August gathering. And all behind all this thing, there is the hidden blessings of our founder president, Professor Manoj Ranjan Naik. With these words, I am again inviting all the officers, all the dignitaries, my friends, to this beautiful occasion. And it is not going to stop here. The university will try its best to have a center of excellence in the integrated maritime studies that will actually justify this Dhara event in this university. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I'm extremely delighted to welcome Professor Jyotiranjan Das, Students Welfare, Shiksha Anusandhan, to grace the dais. And now, may I please welcome Professor Ganti Murthy to introduce the program Dhara Samudra Manthan to our audience. Thank you so much. Sir, please.
मातृभ्यो नमः, पितृभ्यो नमः, गुरुभ्यो नमः, सभायै नमः, सभापतिभ्यश्च नमो नमः. A very warm good morning to all of you, and a warm welcome to all of the dignitaries, and especially from Indian Navy and Coast Guard and all the personnel from Ministry of Education, Ministry of Culture, and all my dear young friends. So the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, Indian knowledge systems, essentially is not something that is we are unfamiliar. It is something that is there inherently in all of us, and it is the knowledge systems of any country are basically inspired by the philosophy, thought, and basically the culture of those countries, and it is expressed in Bharatiya bhashas, and manifestation of that is through the culture. So when we say Indian knowledge systems, the bhasha, the language of Indian knowledge systems are the Bharatiya bhashas, various Bharatiya bhashas, and the way it finds its expression is through the culture. Keeping that in mind, Ministry of Education and Ministry of Culture collaborated together to come up with this Dhara series of events. And these Dhara, even the name, it's an ode to Indian knowledge systems. The name is Dhara. जब सुनते हैं आप लोग, मैं थोड़ा हिंदी में भी बोलूंगा क्योंकि भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा भारतीय भाषाओं में है. धारा जो है वो बहती है. Dhara is something that flows, and you cannot have a stagnant water and call it Dhara. That is the thought behind this, naming this event Dhara, because we need to look at the past through the present and connect it to the future. So all of the Dhara events not only talk about our past, also look at the future of especially the next 25 years, the Amrit Kal. Why is that so important for all of you, young friends here? Because in next 25 years, you will all be sitting in the stage here, and you will be in the positions to make decisions about India's destiny. And for that, it is very, very important that all of you understand where we have come from. What is our history, and where are we coming from, and what are the things that we can learn from our Indian knowledge systems that essentially can inspire us to do something better and beyond what is possible using today's some of the frameworks. So that is essentially the philosophy of all the Dhara events. So we do two things in any Dhara event. The first thing that we do there is to look at what will this particular area look like in 25 years, next 25 years. So 2047 में ये area कैसे होगा ये सोचते हैं. और उसके लिए, if you want to think about 25 years, you need visionaries. So we bring in the visionaries of that field and from various disciplines to come together and talk about things and then come out with an action plan. And सिर्फ बात करने से तो नहीं होता है, we need kind of an action plan. So we also come up with what we call as a white paper, where we are actually laying down the steps. And then the second important thing is we need to make sure that this is something that is got a societal buy-in. जब तक सब लोगों तक नहीं पहुंचेगा, it's not going to be something that can be sustained. If you want to have a movement that needs to travel, basically go for 25 years, you need to have societal buy-in. For that, we are involved in Jan Bhagidari. So every Dhara event does envisioning exercise for next 25 years and also does Jan Bhagidari. जनता के साथ भागीदारी, उनको हम इन्वॉल्व करते हैं, हम उनके साथ मिल जाते हैं. And so that the idea is ये इतिहास, ये धरोहर, ये knowledge systems हमारे हैं. And unless we own it, we are not going to take it forward. And so that is essentially what we do in every Dhara event. And we have done many Dhara events, especially the IKS division has done 6 of the Dhara events. And Ministry of Culture puts many, many more together. So the first one, the very first one, but it was India's contribution to mathematics in February. Then we did another thing, the Ministry of Culture did another one on calendar systems, India's calendar systems, because that is one of the most scientific calendar systems, if you can think about it. And there was one Dhara event on astrophysics and astronomy. Then we did together, because NEP 2020 had come and we were redesigning and envisioning and implementing, making structural changes to our education policy. There was a need to think about how can we integrate culture into our new education policy, national education policy. So we did an event on that. Again, a Dhara event. And then we focused on Ayurveda, a Dhara event on Ayurveda. And again, we did another event in, that Ayurveda event was done in Bangalore, and another one we did in Thiruvananthapuram, focused on martial arts, India's martial arts. So Kalari Payattu, Ghatka, Silambam, Mallakam, Mardani Khel, from Punjab, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Kerala. We basically had all about 70 artists or so come from different parts of the country, and then we basically did that event there. And from now on, every year, the Kerala government is going to celebrate that as a national event every year. That they have recently declared that. And this event is coinciding with the Bali Yatra is not a coincidence. In fact, we planned it that way. Why did we do that? Because in this, as Nachieketa ji was mentioning, Odisha has a great and glorious maritime history, traditions of maritime history. And then when you think about seafaring, Kalinga Desha was one of the very well-known places. In fact, we read about Ashoka sending his son and daughter to Sri Lanka for spreading Buddhism there. And then we also have the Bali Yatra to go to Bali, Indonesia, and so many traditions. Similarly, we have all coast along the coastline of India, we have very, very glorious traditions of maritime trade, travel, and all those things. And if you look at it, the trade and agriculture are the foundations of the prosperity of any culture. India was contributing, according to some Anders Magazine's report, about 25% of world's GDP for about 1500, 1600 years in the last 2000 years. Why was that possible? Because we were an agricultural surplus country, we could produce a lot, and we were naturally endowed with a lot of resources, and we knew how to trade over the sea. We knew how to travel over the seas. What does that require? So it is not simply just the trade and going on a ship. It requires technology to build the ships that can withstand the seas. It requires technologies to actually go to a place that you want to go. And what does that require? That requires astronomy. Requires you to know how can you predict the latitude and the longitude. And it also requires precise navigation. That requires precise mathematics. So a lot of the developments that we see in mathematics, astronomy, and again, which is again useful for agriculture because you need to know when the monsoons come and all of those, that holistic multidisciplinary development of sciences and engineering and technologies in India were based on these the need to go and travel across the oceans and the need to actually have a good agriculture in India. And that was essentially the whole basis for our prosperity for about 1500 years, 1500 years. And the moment we turned the backs to our oceans, the moment we neglected our maritime traditions, we stopped traveling or decreased our travel to different parts of the world, our prosperity began to decline. And if we want to talk about India becoming a $5 trillion country economy or a $10 trillion economy, we again need to look back at the seas, because Indian Ocean was named because it was India's ocean. And we need to really think about that. And so that is what this event is focused on. And again, just like any Dhara event, this is not going to be the end of it. We'll be following with many other events that will follow this Dhara event. Similarly, there will be other events focused on Sangeeta and Natya Shastra, agricultural traditions of India, Rasayana Shastra and Dhatu Shastra, the metallurgical traditions of India. So many things will be coming out from the IKS division. And especially young friends here, as Nachieketa ji was mentioning very briefly, there are internships that we offer to you all that you can do to explore what kind of technologies did we have, what kind of culture did we have, what kind of science did we have, and then how can you bring that to the modern era. You can do an internship with us. Typically, those things will be out in April, May. So please do watch out, iksindia.org, and where you'll find not only the internships, but also many research proposals. We call for research proposals. We establish centers. That's what IKS division does. So all of these things, the reason I'm mentioning that is because every Dhara event is something that actually continues after the event. So with those things, I will stop here, and thank you all for coming here, and we'll have fun-filled 3 days where we'll learn a lot. Namaste.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm sure we all enjoyed down the memory lane flashback, ancient flashback of our lovely heritage. Thank you so much. Now we are going to see the panoramic video of Samudra Manthan Dhara. Let's enjoy the video. Thank you so much.
In the centuries past, when the world was full of mystery and traveling was reserved for very few, a new form of transport was born: boats or ships. Multiple evidence of Indian maritime activities and merchants sailing for trade have been found in Rig Veda, dating 3500 BC to 2000 BC. Odisha, from the age of the Nandas, was among the greatest maritime trading communities. But it was during Ashoka's reign the region established strong relations with Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Thailand, Egypt, Rome, and Macedonia. This meant more people setting sail on a quest for trade and wealth, and stories and folklores becoming a part of the social fabric of maritime history. One of these myths is the folk tale of Tapoi Katha. The tale forms the basis of the Khudru Kuni Osha festival, which takes place between August and September. Young girls fast for good health, safety, and fortune of their brothers, worship goddess Mangala, who is a form of goddess Durga, and read out a tale relating to a sadhava, or a sailor family, and its only daughter Tapoi, who was mistreated by her 7 sisters-in-law and fed only khuda or rice particles while her brothers were away on a long voyage. The ancient maritime practice of Bali Yatra, or an ocean voyage to Bali, is another such ritualistic tradition from some 2000 years ago that is celebrated across Odisha. In ancient times, voyages were undertaken in vessels called boitas by sadhavas, or merchant mariners, on Kartik Purnima, when the northeast monsoon winds would start blowing from November to February. powering the sails of their boats to the lands they were visiting. Thus, the week-long festival of Boita Bandhana starts each year on the morning of Kartik, the most auspicious month in Odia calendar. People assemble on the banks of river or seashores and float miniature boats made of banana leaves to celebrate the voyages of their brave ancestors. The ceremonial phrase of Akama Boi Pana Guathoi, Pana Guatora, Masaka Dharamamora is recited as a wish for the success of the journey. One of the interpretation of Akama Boi is, do not fear the sky and water, and A or Ashar, Ka, Kartik, Ma, Mag, Boi, Vaishak, the 4 months which are considered sacred. Local traditions ascribe that Bali Yatra may have migrated to Bali around 3rd BCE, when around 2,000 families flee Kalinga after the war. As cultural exchange spread, the tradition of Bali Yatra came to resonate with festival of neighboring countries as well. In Thailand, a similar festival called Loy Krathong is celebrated, and in Indonesia, Masakapam Kapisa is observed, symbolizing good deeds are accounted for and bad ones melt into the sea. It is that time of the year again when the most awaited event of the year, Boita Bandhana, will be observed with much fanfare on the banks of river Mahanadi in Cuttack. India's maritime heritage is filled with such mind-boggling folklores and stories that have deep roots to traditions that are still followed. Going forward, through Dhara, our endeavor will remain committed to spotlighting our myriad historical traditions to the world and continue to celebrate them.
That was indeed a panoramic nostalgia. Continuing with this amazing tradition and heritage flavor, I'm extremely delighted to call upon Srimati Priyanka Chandra, Director, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, Ministry of Culture, to deliver her guest address. Ma'am, please.
Respected dignitaries on the stage and the esteemed audience, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav is an ongoing celebration of the nation to commemorate 75 years of independence and to highlight India's glorious history, culture, and achievements of its people. With a rich culture, heritage, and centuries-old knowledge system, India shines through fields of science, medicine, trade, commerce, and much more. Under aegis of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, Ministry of Culture has launched Dhara, an ode to Indian knowledge system. It is a series of programs highlighting India's contributions and achievements in variety of fields like ancient mathematics, astronomy and astrophysics, martial arts, Ayurveda, maritime traditions, and metallurgy. Today we are here for the launch of Dhara series on the maritime traditions, Samudra Manthan, which takes us back to our ancient knowledge of trade routes and retrace our steps with establishing connections with rest of the world. It's through discussions like these that we preserve our culture heritage and take it forward for the world to know about India being a treasure trove of the knowledge. I will also request to play a video which will give a glimpse on the activities which are done under Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We are really fortunate to be a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and we can enjoy the video on Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Thank you.
आजादी के अमृत महोत्सव का प्रारंभ हो रहा है।
वंदे मातरम, वंदे मातरम, आओ बच्चों तुम्हें दिखाए झांकी हिंदुस्तान
आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव स्वतंत्रता के 75 वर्षों के साथ हमारे देश के गौरवशाली इतिहास, संस्कृति और उपलब्धियों को जानने की पहल है। देश को आजाद हुए 75वें वर्ष में अमृत महोत्सव शुरू किया गया और पिछले एक साल से देश उत्साह और उमंग के साथ ये उत्सव मना रहा है। ये पूरा कार्यक्रम स्वतंत्रता संघर्ष, आइडिया एट 75, एक्शन एट 75, अचीवमेंट्स एट 75, रिजॉल्व एट 75 के 5 पिलर्स पर आधारित है। आजादी के आंदोलन की दांडी यात्रा ने ब्रिटिश हुकूमत के खिलाफ एक अलख जगाई थी। गुजरात की उसी धरती पर एक बार फिर उस सफर को याद करते हुए आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव को लॉन्च किया गया। इस अमृत महोत्सव के दौरान देश भर में विभिन्न कार्यक्रम आयोजित किए गए, जिनमें से प्रमुख थे क्रांतिकारी मंगल पांडे जी को श्रद्धांजलि, मणिपुर के मोइरांग में आईएनए द्वारा भारतीय ध्वज फहराने का अवसर, महिला क्रांतिकारियों की याद में किताब का विमोचन, भगवान बिरसा मुंडा के जन्म दिवस को जनजातीय गौरव दिवस के रूप में मनाना, खुदीराम बोस की याद में सांस्कृतिक कार्यक्रम, जलियांवाला बाग स्मारक का पुनर्निर्माण, ड्रोन शो द्वारा क्रांतिकारियों को श्रद्धांजलि और नेताजी की 125वीं जयंती पर उनकी होलोग्राम प्रतिमा का अनावरण। इन सब के अलावा 2 करोड़ से अधिक नागरिकों ने राष्ट्रगान गाकर अपनी भावना को प्रकट किया और पूर्वोत्तर के रुझाजो गांव में जनजातीय नृत्य का सांस्कृतिक कार्यक्रम आयोजित किया गया, जिसमें जनजातीय समाज का उत्साह देखते ही बनता था। काशी उत्सव से हमारी सांस्कृतिक विरासत और उसके आध्यात्मिक पक्ष से संपूर्ण विश्व परिचित हुआ। देश के बच्चों ने भी अमृत महोत्सव में अपनी भागीदारी करते हुए प्रधानमंत्री को पोस्ट कार्ड लिखकर उनसे अपने सपने शेयर किए। अंतरराष्ट्रीय योग दिवस पर 75 स्थानों पर हुए कार्यक्रमों ने भारतीय योग के महत्व से लोगों को परिचित कराया। रिपब्लिक डे परेड पर भारत की भव्य सांस्कृतिक विरासत का जिन कलाकारों ने प्रदर्शन किया, वो वंदे भारतम नृत्य उत्सव के द्वारा चयनित किए गए थे। लद्दाख में 225 फीट का राष्ट्रीय ध्वज, देशभक्ति गीत, लोरी तथा रंगोली प्रतियोगिता का आयोजन किया गया और जन भागीदारी से ये कार्यक्रम सफल हुए। भारतीय उत्सवों के हर्षोल्लास को कई गुना बढ़ाते हुए उमंग उड़ान उत्सव मनाया गया, जिसमें आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव का संदेश देती पतंगों ने आकाश में उड़ान भरी। आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव के तहत गति शक्ति योजना के लॉन्च के साथ ही अर्बन कॉन्क्लेव में 75 परियोजनाओं का शिलान्यास हुआ और 75,000 लोगों को उनके घर की चाबी सौंपी गई। वाणिज्य सप्ताह, स्मार्ट अर्बनाइजेशन, स्टार्टअप इंडिया और मेघालय की उमंग गोट नदी उत्सव, सुशासन सप्ताह, टेम्पल 360 वेबसाइट जैसे कार्यक्रमों ने अमृत महोत्सव को सफल बनाया है। नदी उत्सव से लोगों में जीवनदायिनी नदियों के प्रति जागरूकता बढ़ी। पिछले एक साल से मनाए जा रहे इस उत्सव में जो उत्साह और जन भागीदारी का प्रदर्शन हुआ है, वो दर्शाता है कि देश इस उत्सव के महत्व को जानता है। विश्व भर में इस प्रोग्राम के तहत इवेंट आयोजित किए गए हैं। मार्च 2021 से अमृत महोत्सव मनाने का सिलसिला आज भी देश में लगातार जारी है। ये हमारे देश, संस्कृति, परंपरा और विरासत पर गर्व करने का उत्सव है।
आजादी का अमृत महोत्सव हमें आजादी की जंग की स्मृतियों को जीने का अवसर देता है।
Thank you, everybody, for enjoying the video and cheering up the amazing time we are having now. Maritime history, as we have seen and enjoyed the videos, and we are getting more closer to watch it more closely. We have with us Shri Sanjeev Sanyal, member of Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, and he is here today to address the keynote speech. So may I please request Shri Sanjeev Sanyal to present his keynote address. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, and let me begin by thanking the faculty and students of Shiksha Anusandhan University for hosting all of us here. Let me also thank the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Culture, and of course, the Indian Knowledge Systems Project, which has put together this program, and specifically invited me to speak about India's maritime past, a topic which is very close to my heart. I've written books about it, as some of you will know. So the question is, why do we need to come to a place like Odisha and tell you about your maritime past? The reason is that sadly, the way we tell Indian history has been, in recent decades, become essentially told from an entirely landlocked way, almost a Delhi-centric continental view of Indian history. And what it does is that it leaves out this extraordinarily rich history of India which is related to the ocean. And this is sad because, remember, we are literally the only country in the world which has an ocean named after us, the Indian Ocean. And much of that history is linked to this state, as you will see as I tell you this story. Because when you read your history books, I'm sure one of the things you would have wondered is the only time that Odisha shows up in it is when Ashoka comes and carries out a massacre here. You almost get the impression that the people of Odisha were sitting around waiting for Ashoka to come and carry out genocide. And after he left, you had nothing else to do. This is utterly absurd view of history, not just of Odisha, but of the whole country. So I'm going to try and show you how this history looks completely different when seen from a coastal perspective. Now, of course, India, given its shape, much of it is peninsular and therefore linked to the sea. And so from the very, very beginning of our history, we have had a close relationship with the sea. And the earliest evidence of this comes right in the beginning from the Vedic and Bronze Age civilization of Harappan. So, whether it's in the Rig Veda, where we have mention of the sea and the oceans, or from archaeology, you can see the mention of maritime trade. So the earliest clear archaeological evidence of maritime trade comes from Harappan sites such as Dholavira. Now, if you look up a map, it will see that Dholavira is in Gujarat and it looks on the map as if it is inland. Actually, if you came to Gujarat 6,000 years ago, you would have seen that the coastline was very different because sea levels were actually higher than what they are today. So what you now know as the Run of Kutch was not salt flats. It was actually the estuary of two major rivers, the Saraswati River and the Indus River. And Dholavira, which now looks like it's inland, marooned in the salt flats of the Run of Kutch, was actually an island and it was a port. And from here, ships would sail out. Some of them would sail south, because do remember the Saurashtra, because sea levels were higher, was also an island. And so you could go to Lothal from Dholavira, sailing out, and Lothal was actually not a port, which is what is written in our text. It was actually a customs depot. And from there, they would sail down along the Konkan coast and down to the Malabar coast. And you could sail west from Dholavira, past a place called Dwarka. Dwarka literally means the gate. And there is evidence in a place in an island called Bet Dwarka, just off Dwarka, of lots of Harappan ships that used to come there, including the anchors and so on. And they would sail out towards the Persian Gulf. And they would visit Oman, and what is now the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, and all the way to what is now Iraq, what is then Sumeria. And they would visit the Sumerian cities there. And what would they trade? They would trade in Indian ivory, in peacocks, in cloth, and all kinds of things. So Mesopotamian, Sumerian cuneiform tablets tell us the story of Indians who visited there, who the Sumerians called the Meluha people. And they tell us that there were these enclaves, what they call villages, of these Meluhans living in and around these Sumerian towns in what is now Iraq. So when you go to the Middle East and you see these groups of large numbers of Indians living there, do remember that Indians have been living in the Middle East in these enclaves for thousands of years. And much of them were, of course, coming from Gujarat at that point in time. And the earliest evidence of an individual Indian comes from a court case recorded in Sumerian texts. And it talks of an Indian or a Meluhan who was there in a court case in which he had been accused of breaking the tooth of a local in a drunken brawl. So the Meluhan was found guilty and he was fined a bunch of silver coins for having beaten up this local in a drunken brawl. Now, who knows? Maybe this is the origin of prohibition in Gujarat. Now, this universe that I just described came to a sudden stop around about 2000 BC because climate changed and the river Saraswati dried up, sea levels fell, and Dholavira got marooned in the middle of the salt flats. That entire universe got destroyed as those cities based on these rivers were on the river Saraswati fell into disuse because the climate had changed. And the people of there kind of migrated all over. Some went west into Central Asia, some went into the into the Gangetic Plains and so on. So the next round of maritime activity that we see happens not on the west coast, but on the east coast, between the westernmost outlet of the Ganga, which is what we now call the Hooghly, near Kolkata, that's in Bengal, and the stretching all the way along the Lake Chilika, which is now in Odisha. So this coastline became, in the Iron Age, the hub of maritime activity, and of course stretching outwards a little bit towards the Andhra coast as well. And from here, merchants began to sail out and began to explore this coastline. Now notice that in the beginning, they did not have the capacity of sailing right across. What they were doing is they were sailing along the coastline. Some of them sailed along the coastline southwards, and they began to explore the island of Sri Lanka. And enough of these people from this Bengal, Odisha area ended up settling in Sri Lanka, so much so that the majority population of Sri Lanka today, the Sinhalese, are of Bengali Odia origin. And their language is Sinhalese, is actually of Bengali Odia, is linked to Bengali and Odia. And there is a very famous story of King Vijaya coming from the kingdom of Vanga, or Bengal, coming and settling there. Now, they were also sailing in the other direction as well. So not only were they sailing south, they were sailing along the coast, past the Irivadi and what is now Myanmar, out towards the Malay Peninsula. And there is an isthmus of Kra. This is the bit of Thailand from which Malaysia hangs, the Malay Peninsula hangs. And then from there, they crossed over to the other side and sailed out towards Vietnam, what is now the Vietnam and Cambodia, but basically is the Mekong Delta. And so we begin to see by the 5th, 6th century BC some presence of Indians there. And over time, they begin to settle there as well. And there's a beautiful story about how this came about, which is told in both Cambodian and Vietnamese legends. And I'm going to tell you this story. Who knows if it's true, but it's very, very important to the founding legends of all these parts of the country. So the story goes as follows. The story is that at some ancient time, who knows when it was, there was an Indian ship captained by a Brahmin called Kaundinya that was sailing along the coast of the Vietnam, Cambodia area, the Mekong Delta, when it was attacked by pirates. And so Kaundinya rallied his troops to his crew, and they fought off the pirates. Unfortunately, what happened as a result of this battle at sea, his ship developed some leaks. So he was forced to take it to the coast and begin to carry out repairs on the beach. So while he was carrying out repairs on the beach, suddenly the local tribe, it was a serpent tribe, a Naga tribe, suddenly surrounded them and threatened to kill them all. And as you can imagine, this was a frightening experience. But nevertheless, Kaundinya again rallied his men, and they were going to defend themselves. But it looked quite hopeless. At this stage, however, luck turned in their favor. Because what happened is that the warrior princess of the Naga tribe saw Kaundinya and fell in love. And she proposed marriage to him. Now, I suppose Kaundinya didn't have too much choice at this point. So he agreed to this marriage. And so the warrior princess named Soma, or the moon-faced one, and Kaundinya got married, and they set up a kingdom of the kingdom of Funan. And this started the beginning of Indianization of Southeast Asia. And it starts not with somewhere close by like Indonesia, but far away in southern Vietnam. And this story of Kaundinya and Soma's wedding is then talked as the foundation myth of all succeeding dynasties that came to rule that part of the world for the next 1,500 years. Even today, the royal family of Cambodia takes its origins back to this marriage. And this would continue as more and more people from India, merchants from India, spread all over the world. On the eastern side, they would go all the way to Japan, to Korea. In fact, Korean history begins, as taught in their textbooks, with the marriage of a local prince to a princess from Ayodhya in UP. So all of this history is there, very well documented in many places. Sadly, this is not taught in Indian history. So I'm hoping that through this, we are able to tell this story. Now what happens as we move forward into history is that we begin to see more and more maritime trade begin to happen. Some of this happens on the west coast, as merchants from the Kerala, Karnataka coast begin to trade with people along on the outward towards the Romans, the Greeks, the Arabs, and so on. And on the other coast, you begin to see merchants from this coastline, the eastern coastline, which of course importantly includes Kalinga, sailing out further and further out. And this is possible because they begin to learn about the monsoon winds. Why are the monsoon winds important? They're important because it is interesting, because part of the year it flows from south to north, and for the rest of the year it flows from north to south. So it allows merchants using sailboats to sail in one direction for part of the year and in the opposite direction in the other part of the year. Now this is very, very useful if you want to trade, because you want to go somewhere and come back. And this happens on both the coastlines. And so you begin to see a lot of trade begin to happen. And you begin to see merchants sailing out from here, sailing out towards Indonesia. Now, how did they sail to Indonesia? Did they sail directly across? No. Because the way you have to sail when the wind is blowing from the north is actually you have to first sail southward, down towards Sri Lanka, and then sail out eastwards towards Sumatra, and then from Sumatra down south towards Java, and finally to places like Bali. And so much of this trade was happening, and so much of it was part of the culture of this part of the world, that every year you still have a festival, Kartik Purnima, where you commemorate this festival. So this is important. Why does Kartik Purnima happen at this time of the year? It happens because this is the time of the year when the winds turn. So if you go to the coastline, and I have seen it myself on the Chandrabhaga beach near Konarak, if you go and stand there at this time of the year, the wind blows from the north. So what is happening when you are celebrating this Kartik Purnima festival? What is happening is effectively you are celebrating the families, the women and children of the merchants coming out to the water body, which is either to the estuary or to the sea itself, and saying goodbye to the men folk who are going off on these long journeys. So this is what you're seeing. So basically, before the sun rises, in a full moon night, when the wind is blowing from the north, it's an obvious time when the ships would set sail. And that is what you're commemorating. And of course, there are similar such festivals held in other parts of the world. Exactly the same reason. In Thailand, and on exactly the same day, Kartik Purnima, they have something called Loy Krathong, where they do exactly the same thing. They put these boats out to sea, commemorating the time in which these ships would set sail. Now, it is important to know that this is not something that happened out there and has no implications today. Even today, there are many places around the world which commemorate this impact of ancient India and the rest of the world. When you go to Singapore, do remember the name is Singhapura, or just like Udaipur, Jaipur, there's Singapore, i.e. the Lion City. Why is a country called, or a city called Lion City out in Southeast Asia? Because it was named as a result of this huge amount of trade that took Indic culture to these parts of the world. There's a country called Indonesia. It calls itself in 1949, when it became independent country, it named itself after India. Why? Because of the enormous influence of India on those parts of the world. The largest Hindu temple in the world is not in India, it's in Cambodia. It's Angkor Wat. So there's enormous influence of India in all these parts of the world. And of course, it is not just culture and trade. It was also geopolitics that was happening at that. So do remember, when you long periods of time, there's a huge amount of geopolitics, trade, interaction that is happening. If you go to Konarak temple, you will also see there is a carving there from the 12th, 13th century of a king who is welcoming a merchant who is giving him a giraffe. So they're going all the way, not just eastward, but also westward to Africa. Now let me tell you that all of this, of course, is not too dissimilar to all the geopolitics of the Indian Ocean that is happening even today. So you went there in the beginning of the 11th century, came to this part of to the Indian Ocean in the beginning of the 11th century. Then what was global trade and geopolitics all about? It was basically about the pipelines of trade that was happening between Egypt, where the Fatimid dynasty was ruling, India, where the Cholas were ruling much of the southern India, and China, where the Song Empire was in power. And a lot of trade was going back and forth between them. And this trade was being carried eastward to China through two straits. One was the Malacca Straits between Java and between Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula, and the other was happening through the Sunda Straits, which is between Java and Sumatra Islands. Now, typically, the Javans used to control the Sunda Straits, and the Srivijaya kings of Sumatra would control the Malacca Straits. This is how trade worked. But what happened is that with the help and backing of the Chinese, you ended up having both the straits, the Sunda Straits and the Malacca Straits, coming under the control of the Srivijaya kings of Sumatra. Now, as always happens with any monopolist, they began to impose ever higher tariffs on trade between India and China. So now, the king of the Cholas, King Rajendra Chola, got very annoyed by this. So he sent in 1017, he sent a warning to the kings of Srivijaya to stop this imposition of control on trade, and they didn't listen. So in 1025 AD, a very large fleet set sail from Nagapattinam, sent by the Cholas, and then the Cholas sailed all the way across to Southeast Asia, where they sacked all the Srivijaya ports and finally defeated the Srivijaya army in a place called Kedah, in what is now in Malaysia, and completely destroyed them. As a result of which, again, the port, these shipping lanes got opened up. The reason I'm telling you this story is so that you do remember that when you think about, the Indo-Pacific and the geopolitics of this region, do remember this is nothing new. This has been going on for thousands of years, and the Indians have been part of this geopolitics for a long time. A lot of it had to do with trade, but sometimes it required military intervention. And so I'm very glad that my friends here from the Indian Navy are here to know that they have a very long lineage as well in this part of the world. Now, do remember that all this trade that I'm talking about is not some small numbers of heroic merchants setting sail to go and explore and trade. Maybe in the very beginning you had individual traders like Kondinya doing all of this. But by certainly the 7th, 8th, 9th century, these were corporatized fleets run by these corporatized guilds. Some of them had fanciful names like the 500, which tells you there were 500 shareholders who were funding. This was from southern India. There was a corporatized guild called the 500. There were many others as well. And they would set sail from places like Kalinga, from the Andhra coast, from the Tamil coast. They were very large corporations. They had their own navies. They had their own armies. And in fact, some of the kings used to be quite frightened of these multinational guilds. Also, interestingly, it is interesting to know who used to finance these. It used to be the temples that used to finance these great voyages. And this is important to know. Sometimes some of you may have wondered, why was there so much gold in these ancient medieval Indian temples? Now, sometimes people get the impression that's because, kings who used to build these temples were handing over all their wealth to these temples. Now, let me assure you that even in ancient times, it was very difficult to get Indian politicians to hand over their money to anyone. So the reason there was so much money and gold in the temples is because the temples used to function as banks, and the venture capitalists who were backing all these voyages to faraway lands. And we even today have these copper plate contracts between the artisan guilds, the merchant guilds, and the financiers, the banks, the temple banks, who were financing all these voyages. So this is how for centuries, this entire ecosystem of trade happened. And it continued to carry on even past empires rose and fell, dynasties came and went. But this was such a well-run ecosystem that it continued forever till about the 13th century, when this whole dynamics changed. India was, of course, conquered by waves and waves of Turkic invasions, which happened from the land, not from the sea. But unfortunately, this impacted our hold on the sea because our ports were sacked, but very importantly, our temples were also sacked, which meant that the financial power that used to back all this maritime activity suddenly fell apart. And then, of course, our maritime dominance went into decline. And the Indian Ocean passed into the hands of the Arabs, the Indonesians under the Majapahit, and eventually the Chinese, and finally, of course, the Europeans. Now, before I end, let me say, there is something, however, to be said about remembering this past and revisiting it. This is such a rich past. It is alive today in festivals that you will celebrate. So, there is an interesting experiment that we are going to do, which I need to tell you about. Because we are, as a part of the Indian Knowledge Systems effort, we're going to do this, which is about stitch ships. So let me tell you about the kinds of ships that Indians were using to sail or make all these great voyages. These ships were not like what you may imagine, that they were nailed together into these big ships that later the Europeans were sailing. these ships were actually stitched together using a very unique technique. Now, why did the Indians stitch their ship together rather than nail them to the frames? Well, we don't know for sure. But certainly it wasn't because we didn't know how to make rust-free iron nails. We actually had the technology for rust-free iron nails. We know that from, for example, the Gupta era iron pillar in Delhi. So we had the technology for rust-free nails, but we still didn't use it. For a variety of reasons, we preferred to stitch our ships together. And there are many foreigners who visited India at that time who comment about this. Many of our traditions still continue with this. And this unique style of stitching to build these big ships continued well into the 16th, 17th century, where unfortunately, finally that technology reached its limits because it couldn't deal with cannons, because this style of stitching together ships was unable to deal with the backlash of firing a cannon. So ultimately, this technique fell into disuse. But there were still ships of this kind being built into the early 20th century. And even now, very small fishing vessels are still being built by a few villages and that still remember this technique. Unfortunately, it's rapidly dying out. So as part of that, we have decided to try and attempt a project to try and, while there are still people who remember how this technique works, to try and build a large ship based on an ancient 2,000-year-old ancient ship design, and then importantly try and sail it. So we're going to try and sail this ship once we have built it, and there'll be a video just after this to show you the kind of ship. But it'll be, as you can imagine, so much fun to sail it on Kartik Purnima from right here in Odisha all the way to Bali. So we are putting this all together, getting all the money sanctioned, etc. But while we are doing this, the Indian Navy very, very kindly has put together the design and studied it and beginning to test it. Of course, do remember that these ancient ships may have very different sailing characteristics from modern sailing ships as well, because we'll have more flexible hulls. We'll have to experiment with different kinds of sails. Technically, in the very early phase, they used to use square sails. Later on, they took lantern sails. All of these have sailing characteristics which we do not know. So we will have to actually build this ship, then actually sail it for a while to figure out how it works. And finally, once we have understood how this works, then hopefully be able to sail it all the way to Indonesia in a few years' time. So with that, let me stop and hand it over to this video that will give you a sense of what we are attempting to do. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir, for sharing the amazing revival of the golden voyage of Bali Yatra and Samudra Manthan. Let us watch the legacy video. Thank you.
എല്ലാവർക്കും വിനീതമായ നമസ്കാരം. എൻ്റെ പേര് ബാബു ശങ്കരൻ. ഞാൻ കോഴിക്കോട് ജില്ലയിൽ വടകരയാണ്. ഞാൻ 40 വർഷത്തോളമായി ഒരു നിർമ്മിക്കുന്ന ഇതിൻ്റെ പണിയായിട്ട് ബന്ധപ്പെട്ട് നിൽക്കുന്നത്. ഞാൻ ആദ്യമായിട്ട് സൊഹാറാണ് മസ്കറ്റിൽ പണിക്ക് വേണ്ടിയാണ് പോയത്. എന്നതിന് ശേഷം അവിടെ നിന്നാണ് ഈ പണികളൊക്കെ ഞാൻ പഠിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് വന്നത്. അതിനുശേഷം ഒരുപാട് തുണികൾ, ഏകദേശം ഒരു 20ഓളം തുണികൾ ഞാൻ ഉണ്ടാക്കിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. അതിൽ കെട്ടുവെള്ളം, അതിൽ ഏറ്റവും പറയേണ്ടത് കെട്ടുവെള്ളം തന്നെയാണ്. കെട്ടുവെള്ളം കയറ് കൊണ്ട് ഉപയോഗിച്ച് കെട്ടുന്നു. അതിൽ മിനറൽ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, കുന്ത്രൂസ് ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, കോട്ടൺ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. എല്ലാം കഴിഞ്ഞു. പിന്നെ ഞാൻ ആലപ്പുഴ ഒരു റൗണ്ട് വെള്ളം ഉണ്ടാക്കിയിരുന്നു. അത് നോഹയുടെ പേരാണ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ളൊരിത്, അതും ഉണ്ടാക്കിയത് ഞാൻ തന്നെയാണ്. അതും അതിനൊരു 6 മാസം 7 മാസത്തോളം വർക്ക് അതും ചെയ്ത് ആലപ്പുഴ വെച്ചിട്ട് അതൊരു ലണ്ടൻ ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ് അത് ഉണ്ടാക്കിയത്. ലണ്ടനിലേക്ക് അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു ഇതാണ്. പിന്നെ ജോലോസ് മസ്കറ്റ്, കാര്യമായ ജോലോസ് മസ്കറ്റ്, അത് നല്ല ഇതാണ്. എന്താ പറയുക, അതിപ്പോൾ സിംഗപ്പൂരിലുണ്ട്. അതാണ് 17 ആളോളം അതിൽ യാത്ര ചെയ്തിരുന്നു. 17 ആള് അതിൽ യാത്ര ചെയ്തിരുന്നു. നല്ല ഇതാണ്. ഇവിടെ കേരളത്തിൽ വന്നിരുന്നു. അത് അതിൻ്റെ ഫോട്ടോ ഒക്കെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. എൻ്റെ എല്ലാ പേപ്പറിലൊക്കെ ഫോട്ടോ വന്നിരുന്നു. അതെല്ലാം നല്ല ഇതാണ്. കെട്ടുവള്ളം എനിക്ക് ഇന്ത്യ ഗവൺമെൻറ്റിന് ഒരു കെട്ടുവള്ളം ഉണ്ടാക്കണമെന്ന് വലിയ ആഗ്രഹമുണ്ട്. ഇന്ത്യയിൽ എൻ്റെ പേര് ഇതുവരെ വന്നിട്ടില്ല. പുറത്താണ് എന്നെ പറ്റി അറിയുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് ഇന്ത്യയിൽ അറിയണം എന്നുള്ളൊരു ആഗ്രഹമുണ്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ എവിടെ വെച്ചിട്ടും ഇങ്ങനൊരു ബോട്ട് ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ എനിക്ക് താല്പര്യമാണ്. പിന്നെന്താ വേറെ കാര്യമായിട്ടൊന്നും.
A project to revive and preserve the ancient art of construction of stitched ships is being pursued. The technology used for the construction will be stitching the wooden planks instead of securing through nails. The ship, once constructed, will sail using traditional navigational techniques along ancient sailing routes. The routes would be from Gujarat to Oman and to the Persian Gulf, or from Odisha to Bali, Indonesia. It would be a joint project under the guidance of Shri Sanjeev Sanyal, Member Economic Advisor Council to Prime Minister, steered by Ministry of Culture and Ministry of Defense, particularly Indian Navy. To officially launch the project and to commemorate the event, a sample piece of the ancient stitched technique shall be handed over to Shri Sanjeev Sanyal on this auspicious occasion of Samudra Manthan Bali Yatra Utsav under the Dhara project. So, may I now request Commander Sandeep Roy, who is with us today, to come up and felicitate Sanjeev Sanyal ji. A precious moment. The Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav from Ministry of Culture, the Samudra Manthan Dhara project. It's indeed a precious moment to preserve the ancient, rich heritage. Thank you, Commander Roy, for doing the honors. Congratulations, Sanyal ji. Sure. Yes, sir. Please.
Just before I step away, I want you to know why this is a very special thing that the Indian Navy has given me just now. You see, as I said, the sailing, the boat building technique was not about nailing the ships together. I told you, right? That is not because we did not know how to make nails or even rust-free nails. Of course, Indians were dealing with Romans and Chinese, etc., who were all using nails to put their ship together. We were stitching our ships together, and this is an example of how this is stitched together. So these are two planks. They're stitched together, as you can see, and inside here. Now, of course, this is done with coir ropes. It will have to be soaked in fish oil and a bunch of other oils to make it waterproof. But my idea here is to just show you what the technique is, so that you know, when you saw Babu Sankaran's video, this is the technique with which the whole hull is stitched together, and then waterproofed using fish oil and other things. So that's, just want you to know that this is something, consequently, an example of that kind of stitching. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. This was truly voluminous in terms of passion and reviving the golden heritage. May I now call upon Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Pradipta Kumar Nanda, to address the gathering. Sir, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Esteemed keynote speaker of this function, Sri Sanjeev Sanyal ji, Member of Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, and Dr. Murthy, GS Murthy, National Coordinator for IKS Division, esteemed guest of honor, Srimati Priyanka Chandra, Director, AKAM, Ministry of Culture, Dr. Nachieketa Sharma, our Director Outreach Program, Professor Jyotiranjan Das, our Dean Students Welfare, all Navy officers, distinguished guests, dignitaries of the dais, and students, faculty colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I must thank Ministry of Education and Ministry of Culture for giving us the opportunity to host this kind of event under the aegis of Dhara program. And it's a unique opportunity. I could see and I could listen the speech, I think the marvelous speech by Mr. Sanyal, who could sail us right from 2000 years back to today. And this kind of event, I think Indian knowledge system, I think we are preserving. And I believe that we must know this. Therefore, the NEP has blended the professional education with all kind of other educations like history, geography and others, and fine arts and social science, so that one is equipped with all kinds of knowledge. We need to know our glory, because we should be proud of our own system, own glory, own people, own country, so that we think big, so that we will be proud of ourselves, so that we can rebuild ourselves like whatever the kind of we have seen this teaching art of the old art of even today existing. And if you look back the what we had from the Mr. Sanyal, that we had talent, we had the human brain is creative, whether it is 5,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago or today. And depending on the different kind of the conditions, the creativity actually flourishes, flowers. And therefore, even those days, the technology was not advanced, communication was not there, and there is kind of no kind of the formal science of whatever we call economics or social science. Nevertheless, everything was being done in the aegis of different connotation. So the creativity remained there itself, because the teaching ships is one of the bright example where one could think of building a strong ship with kind of the all waterproofs and sustaining in the water for a sometime quite some time. As far as the business is concerned, I think Maritime was the kind of landmark for this state of Odisha and also major part of the country. I believe we still will have this. We have to have control over not only maritime but also the space, water, and land, all three. So we have very strong kind of the motivating forces along all three directions. Our all young minds should also cherish and flourish with the available kind of the tools, techniques, and to be creative and to march forward and living with the history, living with the kind of the glory we had. We must march forward to be Vishwaguru one day. I wish the kind of the revitalizing our knowledge system, Indian knowledge system, which is so rich, and I will also set footprints for tomorrow's kind of the generation, that we were rich in knowledge, in kind of wealth, in kind of benevolence, in kind of making this whole fraternity, human fraternity as one. That's called Vishwaguru. So with this, I think I'll not take much time. I once again thank all the speakers and all of the guests who are here, I think, to celebrate this function, which is a special function for the state of Odisha, and also, as I learned, this many parts of the world. So I wish all the best, all success for this conference, for this program, for these 3 days, and wish that all of us will enjoy and celebrate. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. So we will request you to felicitate our dignitaries for today. So, yes, sir. Volunteers are requested to come up with the mementos, the token of appreciation, token of respect to the remarkable contribution to the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, Ministry of Culture, Srimati Priyanka Chandra ji, Shri Professor Ganti S. Murthy ji, Shri Sanjeev Sanyal ji, indeed, a remarkably precious moment for the varsity, Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Tourism, a token of gesture from Siksha Anusandhan deemed to be university. Thank you so much. Now, may I request Professor Jyoti Ranjan Das, Dean Students Welfare, to address and offer the vote of thanks. So please.
Jai Jagannath. This is the beginning of the tradition of Odisha, which is full of heritage, culture, and tradition. Whatever we are doing here, we are expressing here, or we are celebrating here, the witness Lord Jagannath, Mahaprabhu, elder brother Balabhadra, and sister Mahasubhadra. Today is a very auspicious and holy day in the history of Odisha tradition, that is the Kartika Purnima. And most of you are waiting for tomorrow, not today, particularly the boys, if you have given up taking non-veg for the entire month. This is what most of us are waiting for tomorrow, and that is also better known as Chadokhai. And Honorable Keynote Speaker, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, the member, Economic Advisory Council to Honorable Prime Minister, Government of India, Mr. G.S. Murthy, National Coordinator in the Knowledge System Division, Srimati Priyanka Chandra, Director, AKAM Ministry of Culture, Professor Pradipta Kumar Nanda, Honorable Prof, Vice Chancellor, SO deemed to be University, Dr. Nachieketa Sharma, Director, University Outreach Program, esteemed dignitaries of the dais, deans of constituent faculty, faculty members, and my dear students. I'll just take 1 minute of yours for the purpose I'm being here, just to say with a louder voice, thank you all, Bande Utkal Janani, nothing to say.
Thank you so much, sir. So we now come to close the inaugural ceremony quite officially, and we have a cultural showcase. Just in a short while, the students of Siksha Anusandhan deemed to be university, who form the dramatic society of the university, the Tonal Stuck, have got a beautiful cultural presentation on Bali Yatra. So we now request our esteemed dignitaries to enjoy the cultural presentation. Yes, yes. Thank you so much.
କରନ୍ତୁ ଏବଂ keep your energy intact.
ritual of the marriage of Shri Vishnu with the holy basil plant. This ritual is performed on any of the days between the 11th day of the bright fortnight of the Hindu lunar month Kartik to the full moon day of Kartik. A day prior to the marriage, the Tulasi Vrindavan is painted and decorated. Sugarcane and marigold flowers are offered on the Vrindavan tamarind and Indian gooseberry are kept at this place.
तुळसी चौरमुळे
The only daughter of Tanyavanta was the youngest of the 8 children he had. The child was the darling of not just her parents but her brothers as well.
पड़ुची सिए ताकू पाई बजिए गोपे पड़ुची सिए आखि मिटी कामारुची एका कालिया रूपा सगड़ी रे सुना कोनिया रूपा सगड़ी रे सुना कोनिया
Bandhan, which is also known as the boat festival of Odisha, is celebrated on the auspicious event of Kartik Purnima. In the past, when our ancestors had little advancement in the field of science and were dependent on the ancient rituals, Kartika Purnima is celebrated as a prayer to the deities to get their blessings and keep the mariners safe on their journey.
मो सत भाई को संगे ले जा सुभरे अल्प दिन रे साथे रे नहीं फेरिया दुआरे जा रे बोई तो जा मो सत भाई को संगे ले जा.
This festival takes place in the early morning of the Kartik Purnima, which is the full moon day in the month of Kartika in the traditional Odia calendar. Since it falls on the lunar phase of the solar calendar, the exact date of the festival changes every year. The festival is celebrated to mark the commemoration on the day when Sadhavas would set sail to distant lands of mainland and insular Southeast Asia and Sri Lanka for trade and cultural exchange. This festival is celebrated on the Kartika Purnima, which is the full moon day in the month of Kartik. Kartika month is considered to be the most auspicious and sacred in the traditional calendar. In the early hours of the day, people assemble on the banks of rivers, ponds, tanks, and seashore and float miniature boats made of paper, banana bark, and leaves.
साधव पुओ जीवे दरिया पारी बणिज करबाकू बोईत धरी परिया परी गणित କରିବାକୁ ବୋଇତ ଧରି ଶିବ କଳସ କହିଲାଣି ଦଣ୍ଡ ଦୁଆର ପାଖି ବନ୍ଦନ ପାଇଁ ଶାଶୁ ମାଟି ବୋହୁ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଡାକି
ମଜା ଢୋଲିଆରେ ଢୋଲକ ହରି ସୁଧିଲାଣି ସାଧ ବାଣୀ ହୁଳହୁଳି ମଜା ଢୋଲିଆରେ ଢୋଲକ ହରି ସୁଧିଲାଣି ସାଧ ବାଣୀ ହୁଳହୁଳି
Odisha had a huge coastline of around 500 kilometers with a lot of indentations that lead to the formation of many ports along the coastline. Further, geographical factors had a key role in defining the timing and route of the sea trade. Normally, the traders, commonly known as the Sadhabas, used to start their journey with the loaded ships in the month of November as the wind blew from the land to the sea direction with the retreating monsoon. In order to remember this glorious tradition, Odisha till today celebrates Kartika Purnima in the month of November.
Wonderful cultural presentation by Daniel Stuck, the Dramatic Society of Siksha Anusandan. Special thanks to our Bhutanese students who have featured as Balinese business people trading and traders and merchants. Thank you everybody for gracing the occasion and encouraging us. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and happy Kartik Purnima. Happy Bali Yatra. Thank you so much.